I just didn't want to interrupt you while you were going there.
It's all good. Do I need to
If you
repeat
could
the
repeat that,
example?
no, we're fine. Go ahead and call the meeting to order.
All right, let's call the meeting to order.
Okay, Board President Ruggieri,
Here.
Director Case,
Here.
Director Kilkenny.
Here.
I'm marking Director Oiserman absent and Director Shea.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tef. So from here, I would like to adopt the agenda. Are there any changes or comments about the agenda? None. Anything from the public about the agenda?
1 second. Stephen.
Good evening, everybody. Yeah, this is actually the same comment as last month. How does the public get something on the agenda? We make requests and they get ignored and ignored again. Now, I realize maybe you don't like receiving criticism or dealing with topics that maybe you are not important to you individually, but you know, it is a real frustration dealing with a small agency that does not respond to the public. And, you know, you guys are basically appointed. I think you have an obligation not only to me, but also the rest of the public to reach out and listen to what concerns people have. Specifically, one of the things I asked was a discussion on this very topic. How do you, what is the responsibility of staff to respond to the public? What is the professional standards that you'd like them to adhere to? Because quite frankly, well, I shouldn't say all the time. It oftentimes we get completely ignored. And when there's an issue of safety or other concerns, these are really concerns that all of us share in the community. But it's really off-putting that we can't actually even discuss them because they're not put on the agenda. I think the answer is to pay a little bit more closer attention and make requests of the general manager to do a little bit more outreach. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, for your comment. Right, from here, let's consider the agenda adopted. Moving forward to the actuarial report presentation, we are to review this.
Yeah, I have, I'm going to bring over, we do have two guests from GovInvest. They are the firm that did the actual report. So they have agreed to come over tonight to present. So I'm just kind of moving them over into the screen here so they can come on. This is Evie Loxana and Michael Melendez as soon as they can make their way over. And then they will go ahead and present this report. It's fairly complex. This is something every 2 years, the district is required by what's known as GASB 75, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, to produce a full OPEB actuarial valuation. That's what this report is. And then on the in-between years, we, kind of just do a financial disclosure. All this information is then used by our auditors and goes into our audited financial statements every single year as notes and is incorporated into our overall net position. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Evie, am I pronouncing that right, or is it Evie?
Got it. It's Evie.
Evie, perfect. Evie and Michael, thank you both for joining us. I know you put together a presentation, so by all means, you can share your screen, and I'm gonna just let you take it away from here.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for putting us on the agenda. I know this is not the most exciting topic to be talking about in the evening, but it is something that the district is required to do for your financial disclosure. So hopefully, I can give you some idea of what this is about and what kind of liability we're talking about. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to ask questions and stop me. And the presentation is sort of like a high-level overview of the much broader and lengthier report that is included in the agenda. So there is a first section will be sort of like a high level overview of what we do, the process, what it entails, what does it actually mean. And then second part of the presentation will talk about trends that we are seeing, changes from last valuation. And like I said, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to stop me and ask questions. So going into some basics concepts. So OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. So the easiest way to explain this to many agencies who are familiar with pension benefit is that OPEB is anything other than pension that you offer to your employees at retirement. So currently the district only offers health benefits, meaning it subsidized medical and prescription drug coverage through CalPERS. You do not offer any other kind of subsidized benefits, be it dental benefits, vision benefits, or life insurance. So only subsidized retiree health benefits. So there are 4 components to an OPEB valuation. So if you think about OPEB valuation, you can think of basically it's a cash flow projections, but it is a very long-term cash flow projections. It starts from retirement. So some of your existing retirees, those are the people who are already withdrawing benefits. But we also must value liability for your active employees. So they are still currently working, but they have been promised this benefit. So when they are eligible to retire, we will have to basically value their liability. So their cash flow will start not currently while they are active, but once they are retired. So the 4 OPEB valuation components, the first one is benefit provision. So we need to know, obviously, okay, how do an active employee be eligible to retire? And then once they are eligible to retire, what kind of benefits do you offer? Do you offer medical, prescription drug, dental, vision, or any other kind of benefit? And then we also need to know how much does the district pay for this benefit? The other 3 buckets, they fall under assumptions, because this is a very, very long-term cash flow projections is going out almost like 50, 60 years because benefit is provided until death. So there are numerous assumptions that go into the valuation. So the first bucket of assumption is healthcare assumptions. So we need to make an assumptions as to, okay, once an employee is eligible to retire, are they assumed to take the subsidized benefits from the district? And then you have many different health plan options offered through CalPERS that employees can choose from, and the election at retirement may not be the same as what they are currently enrolled in. So we need to make an assumption as to the health plan elected by the participant at retirement. We also need to make an assumption as to whether they will elect to cover spouses. Since we are talking healthcare, then obviously we know healthcare costs continues to increase, so we have to project and assume how quickly they will increase. So there is a healthcare trend rate assumption that goes into the valuation. The next set of assumption is called economic assumptions. Because this is a long-term cash flow projection that goes far out into the future, and we are supposed to measure liability as of a specific measurement date, we have to discount back all future payments into to the measurement date. So in order to do that, we use what we call a discount rate. And this may be, I don't know if any of you remember what it was in the past, but the discount rate has dropped due to a slight change in there's an update to the crossover test that we have to do, and I'll talk more about that later. But essentially, if a plan is fully funded, or the trust is expected to be able to pay for all future benefit payments, you can actually use the expected rate of return of the trust. And I think that was what was used in past valuations. But when I did the valuation this year, it does not seem like the trust is able to pay for all future benefit payments. So at some point in the future, the trust is expected to be depleted. In that case, the discount rate that has to be used for valuation purposes is what we call a blended discount rate. So it's a discount rate for several years where the plan is fully funded. We can use expected rate of return of the trust. And for other years when the trust is already depleted, we have to use the discount rate for an unfunded plan. Discount rate for an unfunded plan is based off of a municipal bond index that is pretty much market driven. And it fluctuates. So you will see later on that there is a change in the discount rate. It has decreased from, I believe it was 6.5, and we are now down to about 4.35%. And that drives a lot of the increase in the district's liability. Last bucket of assumption is demographic assumptions. So mortality assumption is applied to both active employees and retirees. And then there are 3 additional decrements that apply to active employees. The first one being terminations, because not all your active employees will make it to retirement. Some of them may terminate along the way, so we have a termination assumption. Some of them may become disabled and they are eligible to essentially retire earlier than somebody who's just retire under regular service retirement. And then once somebody is eligible to retire, not all of them will go at once. So we have retirement rates that vary by age and service. So those are the 4 OPEB valuation components. Are there any questions before I move on to the valuation results? Okay, moving on to the valuation results. So the measurement date up top is basically the date that we measure the liability as of. And the fiscal year ending financial disclosure is the fiscal year ending financial statement that you are disclosing these results in. So as you can see, they're 1 year off. And I believe that is on purpose. And, you know, back when GASB 75 was first adopted a few years back, the district must have made a choice to use what we call a look back method, where we are measuring liabilities and assets as of the prior fiscal year end, but we are using it for the current fiscal year end disclosure. So essentially, your liability measurement is sort of like a year behind than the financial statement they are disclosed in. So the most recent valuation that we did is measure the liability as of 6/30/21. And the liability is at 5.9 million. And as of 6/30/21, you have an asset of about 445,000. That leaves 5.5 million unfunded liability. Funded percentage-wise, it's 7.5%. Now, as you can see, from 2019 to 2021, your liability didn't change as much from 19 to 20, but it did jump up to 5.9 million. In this last valuation. And there will be slides later on that talks about what changed. But like I mentioned previously, a lot of that increase is driven by the discount rate decrease. At the bottom of the slide, it talks about actuarially determined contribution, or we call it ADC for short. The ADC is sort of like the theoretical actuarial value if you are trying to fund this in a systematic way. With a guarantee that after a certain period, you will be fully funded. That's what we recommend as the actuary that you should contribute, which is the ADC. and there's no requirement to fund. And some agencies have the fiscal means to actually fund the ADC, some don't. So it is really up to agency to sort of figure out, what is it that you can afford to fund. So moving on to the next slide. The next two slides talks about changes since prior evaluations, and these are all assumption changes. And the first one is the biggest impact, like I talked about before. It's basically the decrease in the discount rate from 6.5% to 4.35. So there will be a slide later on that shows the crossover test. But the crossover test, the aim really is to demonstrate that with the funding policy that the district has, which is currently paying for retiree health benefit expenses from outside of the trust and contribute 100%, 100,000 to the trust, we aren't able to demonstrate that the trust is sustainable. What we see is at some point in the future, the trust is expected to be depleted. And that is the reason why we cannot use the expected rate of return of the trust, which we also decrease from 6.5% to 6%. And with the municipal bond index at a very low level as of 6/30/2021, so unfortunately that drives your liability down to 4.35%.
Evie, can I ask a question?
Sure.
If we're not taking any assets out of the trust and we're only putting assets into the trust at this point in time, then how is the assumption made that it'll be depleted?
So the assumption is agnostic as to where you pay your benefit payments from. So essentially what we are saying is you pay for your benefit payments into the trust and then it goes back out immediately. And then you make an additional contribution of 100,000 to the trust. So essentially the net contribution to the trust is only 100,000. Now, in order for the trust to be sustainable, you have to pay for the ongoing costs that you will incur when you have new employees coming on board. So the cost for the new employees coming on board is what we call normal cost, or the cost for new entrants. And I believe at some point your 100,000 is, so the 100,000 that you pay for all your existing retirees health benefit payments from outside of the trust. So your 100,000 is really used to pay for the future new entrants. At some point, that 100,000 is not going to be enough to pay for your future new entrants. That's when the trust goes depleted. So for the trust to be sustainable, it not only takes into account that you have to pay for the benefit payments for existing retirees, but we have to be able to demonstrate that the trust can pay for the service costs for new entrants, essentially. And that may be one of the items that your prior actuary missed, because I have never seen an agency with a very low funded ratio that doesn't pay the ADC can use the expected rate of return of the trust.
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a longer conversation than to get into at this point. I mean, they certainly have their rationale and methodology as to why they calculated it that way. I understand why you're calculating in a different way, but I think it's important to for the board to understand that you're looking at two. The reason is these are two kind of different actuarial methodologies and understandings, and the prior company utilized a different type of a methodology, not a different type of methodology, just utilize a different understanding, and that was how they came. And you're utilizing this, which again is understandable, and I understand the the testing that you're putting this against. But that said, that changes the long-term future liability, but it's not like new expenses came on that all of a sudden now we have a $1.5 million more that we've taken on in be it through higher benefits or greater numbers of employees or retirees or anything like that.
Sure. And And I mean, the way I understand how the crossover test is supposed to be done, and I've worked at different companies, and I looked at the GASB 75 requirements very closely. They do have implementation guide that talks about how the crossover test must be done. And it's pretty clear that you have to take into account the funding for new entrants. That is not something that is negotiable. So whatever you are deciding as far as funding policy goes, you are not only supposed to take care of your existing retirees' benefit payments, you have to take into account the benefit payments for the new entrants, the cost for the new entrants. And that is usually where misinterpretation comes into play. Like some actuaries do not take into account that new entrants service costs. And that's when, you can use an expected return of the trust when really it's not possible.
No, I understand. And unfortunately, the former actuary is no longer with that firm, and I don't have any means by which to contact him. Otherwise, I would have liked to have gotten you two together. So, because he can obviously explain, and the communications I had on it weren't incredibly detailed, but that's fine. I think Bill has a question too.
Yes, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, Evie, correct me if I'm wrong, but in order to sustain the trust, you're talking about the ADR or ADC contribution would go to the trust to maintain the new and current.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
but-
instead of 100,000, we should be putting in almost 500.
Correct. But I will make one caveat. You don't have to, obviously, if you don't have the ability to contribute that much to the trust, you don't have to go there immediately. So, but obviously, on the other side of that, the consequences is that you just cannot use the expected return of the trust to value your liability. But if, let's say, you increase your funding, additional funding that goes to the trust on top of your retiree healthcare expenses to an amount greater than 100,000, that I can then plug into the model and demonstrate that it is sustainable, you can do it that way as well. What ends up going to happen is that, okay, if you contribute the ADC, you will get 200% funded in 15 years, for example. If you contribute PayGo plus an additional dollar amount, for example, 150,000, it's just going to take you longer to get 200% funded, let's say 20 years, but eventually
Right.
you'll get there.
No.
Right. And I want to make it clear, and Evie, correct me by all means if I'm wrong, but with the that amount that Bill's talking about, that was on the previous slide, the 458, that also includes the PayGo amount. And for those who don't clearly understand, the PayGo amount is our actual cost for benefits this year. That's we're already paying that. So
Correct.
It's not like we're paying the benefits and then throwing another 500, 458,000. So we're spending, 200 something thousand every year strictly on the benefits. So you have to subtract that from it. So the difference isn't quite as big, I think, Bill, as you made it sound. The difference is actually, we're talking about, another 100,000 or something.
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that part was clear. It's not, and to Evie's point, the fact that we are contributing does help. And the fact that we are not, as of right now, we have no intention of pulling from the trust. We are simply building the trust. A lot of agencies put into the trust, but then they take out from the trust every year the cost strictly for their retiree benefit portion. We're paying the retiree and the active out of our general fund assets, and then just simply putting an additional 100,000 into the trust without ever taking anything out of the trust.
So,
Go ahead.
so one other point regarding the blended discount rate. So it is really a function of a blend of two rates. So one is the expected rate of return of the trust, which is 6%, and the other one is municipal bond index. Well, the municipal bond index was 2.16 in 2021. It went up to probably about 3.8% in 2022. So just by virtue of that market fluctuation for 6/30/22 measurement date, where we are doing a roll forward, you will already see an improvement in your discount rate. Just because the market swings higher by 1%, the bond index
Right, which will have a large impact on the total
on the
liability.
liability.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Mhm.
But
Right,
at the same time, you have to remember that your asset probably also dropped from 21 to 22 because of the market. So
Mhm.
while your liability will be lower, your asset most likely will be lower too. So we may or may not end up at around the same funded percentage as of 6/30/22.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. The next set of assumptions that we are changing, those are demographic assumptions. This is an assumption that we are not expecting to change very frequently. A lot of the demographic assumptions, they key off of CalPERS assumptions, and they just released their most recent experience study in 2021. So when those were released, we updated the valuations to use the most recent assumptions. So we don't expect to update this until CalPERS release their next experience study, which is probably not until 2026. So we are going to use the same demographic assumptions probably in the next 2 full valuation cycles. Very little impact on the liability on the demographic assumptions, and rightly so because of the frequency of experience study being done by CalPERS. So the assumption usually tracks the experience pretty well. Next set of assumption is healthcare assumption. This will be something that we will always look at every time we do a full valuation. The healthcare trend rates is the expectation of future healthcare cost increases nationally in the United States. So although there are a lot of short-term shocks that will affect short-term trend rates, because of the nature of OPEB valuation that is very long-term, is really the long-term trends that have the biggest impact on your liability. So in the long term, the trend is more driven by GDP and CPI and technology advancement in the healthcare space kind of thing. So as you can see in the description here is that the trend table, it reflects the actual premium increases from 21 to 22, but after that it goes down to 5.75% for non-Medicare and 5.4% for Medicare. It gradually decreases to 4.04% for non-Medicare and 4% for Medicare in 2075. So it is really a very long gradual decrease in healthcare costs. This assumption change hardly makes any difference on your liability. So what are all the other assumption changes that we have made? So we updated the payroll growth. So although your benefit is not payroll driven, because of the actuarial cost method that we have to use to do GASB 75, we need a payroll growth to sort of divide up the liability between past service, what is already accrued or earned, and what is attributed to future service that is not yet earned. So we use the payroll growth for that. It makes very little difference on the liability, but we update it because CalPERS updated the assumption. We did update the active employees spousal election at retirement. So in the prior valuation, anybody who elected spousal coverage while active, they are assumed to elect spousal coverage at retirement, which is equivalent to about 64.7% spousal election in the last valuation. This year's valuation, we updated to 65% for male and 50% for female, and it did decrease your liability slightly. And then there's a liability for dependent, and we updated how much younger the dependent is compared to the retiree's age. It decreases from 40 to 36, and that also reduces the district's liability. So all the other assumptions essentially create a net decrease to the liability. I know those are all descriptions. We will get into the numbers attached to all those updates in the next slide, but we're gonna stop by here for a second to talk about the crossover test. So it's easier to look at the chart instead of reading all the words, but what the words essentially say is that we want this yellow to always be above the purple. We do not want it to cross. And this is what I mean by a crossover test, because the yellow, which is essentially the projected trust asset, is expected to be depleted at some point in the future before the benefit payments goes to zero. For the years when the asset is above the benefit payments, we use 6% asset return to discount the payments. But past this year, which I believe is 2057, we have to discount this using 2.16%. So we basically just blend those two and come up with a single equivalent discount rate of 4.39%, I believe. 4.35%. So that's what we mean by the crossover test. So gain or loss reconciliation, looking at the liability side first, we started with 6/30/2020 liability of 4.7 million. And due to passage of time, your active employees earning 1 more years of service, the liability is expected to grow to 4.8 million. There are obviously different changes that happen during the year. And the first two lines here, the demographic experience and the healthcare costs, those speak to differences between actual and expected experience. So like I mentioned previously, there are numerous assumptions that go into the evaluation. Every time we do evaluation, we will compare what actually happened to what we expect to happen. So on the demographic side, it is a less favorable experience compared to expected. And because of the size of your group, which is very small, changes to 1 or 2 person retiring earlier than expected, or something of that nature can really impact the liability quite a bit. So like maybe somebody was reported with different date of birth than last year, that could impact the liability. Somebody decides to not cover spouse anymore, that also impacts the liability. The other way, it will decrease the liability. Or somebody retiring earlier than when we expect them to, that will increase the liability. So demographic experience typically happen regardless of what we assume. And these past few years, it may have something to do with what is going on in the outside world, that we are so far off on the demographic assumption. But hopefully, we just updated the demographic assumption that it will mimic the actual experience closer. On the healthcare cost side, the actual premium actually decreases since the last valuation. So we obviously expected some kind of an increase, but we actually end up getting a decrease in the premium rates, especially for the Medicare group. So we are showing a liability decrease due to healthcare costs, actual premium costs compared to expected. Now, the rest of the items shown here, starting from discount rate, demographic assumption, and all other changes, those are assumption changes. And these 2 items, I will say those are sort of minor, but obviously the discount rate update increased your liability by 1.4 million. So you add all those up, we ended up with actuarial loss of 1.1 million, and we end up with 5.9 million total OPEB liability as of June 30th, 2021. So when we do this roll forward for from 21 to 22, we will not be seeing any of these except most likely just the discount rate update. So we will do the crossover test again and update the municipal bond index. And I anticipated you will have a discount rate higher than 4.35% for the next valuation. So the liability will most likely decrease from 5.9 million. So looking on the asset side, we started the year with asset as of 282 as of 6/30/2020. We expect contributions of 100,000, and with 6% expect the investment income of 20,000. We expect the asset will be 402,000 as of 6/30/2021. So we do actually get 100,000 contribution, net contributions between the total contribution less the benefit payments. You have a much better asset performance from 2020 to 21 of 63,000. So you ended up the year 6/30/21 with slightly more asset than we expected at 440. So this slide just shows the progression of your unfunded liability as well as your funded percentage. So it looks like the district started funding in 2018. So in 2018, there's a drop in liability, which I suspect is due to the discount rate. And the plan is mostly unfunded. So you are at 1.4% funded at that point. But the red portion of the bar is sort of decreasing from 18, 19, 20, and you started building up a little bit of asset. As of 21, the height of the bar shot up again because of the discount rate change. Your asset is just creeping up, basically adding 100,000 that you deposit every year. So funded percentage wise, you have grown from unfunded as of 2017 to 7.5% as of 2021. So talking about the concept of ADC, so the ADC is made up of two components. The normal cost is essentially the cost of providing benefit for the coming year. The normal cost is only generated by active employees because they earn 1 more years of service. So they earn basically a slightly more portion of their benefit. So that's the normal cost. It's only for the coming year. Now you have all these unfunded liability from the past that you have not funded. So we tend to amortize those because obviously it's a huge amount. And the amortization payment plus the normal cost makes up your ADC. So this chart is basically showing what you are funding or your cash outlay for your retiree healthcare expenses, whether it is paid from the general fund outside of the trust or whether you make the contribution to the trust. So the blue bars, they are essentially the benefit payments that you are making from outside of the trust, and then you deposit 100,000 to the trust. For 2022, our valuation system projected about 228,000 retiree healthcare expenses, and you will contribute 100,000 to the trust for a total cash spend of 328,000 in 22. Now the ADC, obviously it's a little bit higher because of the amortization payment. So the goal is to get here to contribute the ADC, but if you cannot, if you can close this gap a little bit, you should be able to use the expected rate of return of the trust. We added a historical ADC on the right, and we also show what the ADC is going to be for 23 and 24, which is about 530, 540, and 570,000 for 23 and 24. So looking at just your cash spend, regardless of whether you have a trust or you do not have a trust, this is the expected benefit payments that you are expected to spend for your current population. So we are not adding any kind of new entrants in this chart. So once an active employee is retired, that person retired. So we started out about 200,000 or so benefit payments, but it is expected to grow to as high of 700,000. And before it starts to decrease as you know your population age and go into Medicare. So these are the cash that we expect you to have to pay anyway for retiree healthcare expenses. And the idea of having a trust and contributing your ADC is that you are contributing more here, but once the amortization payment is out of the way and you are 100% funded, your contribution will essentially drop once you reach the 100% funded status. So you will be higher here contribution wise, but after that it will decrease to be lower than your benefit payments, at which point you will no longer have to pay for benefit payments from your general fund, but you can tap into the trust to pay for your benefit payments. And obviously, the more money you put in early, the more money that will earn investment income, which is essentially expected to help you pay for future benefit payments. So that is all I have. Are there any questions that I can answer? Okay. Are there any questions on the report? I don't know if anybody has a chance to read it. It's very lengthy. Okay.
No. Very comprehensive. Thank you both for this report and for going through all of the data with us. It's a lot to digest.
Sorry,
Okay.
I was muted. It is a lot to digest, and again, I think for me, some of the key takeaways, and not to downplay, what ultimately is certainly a liability and one that I, hope to bring attention to. This isn't a tomorrow liability, this is a very long-term look. I mean, I think she said this stretched out to 2057, I believe was what the number kind of looked at. And starting that trust 4 years ago was a way to start addressing this. And again, as we kind of go through some of the steps that we've been going through, looking at, what are the district's kind of long-term financial obligations, from capital needs to this. Next month, we'll look at the pension valuations that have just recently been updated. It starts to paint the picture for the board as to, what is the best way to allocate any levels of excess and or available revenue towards addressing these long-term liabilities. But this isn't, again, a tomorrow liability. And I think, as Evie said, it's going to change by the next report. It goes down some reports, it goes up on other reports. It's it's a methodology and an actuarial study. It's not a current snapshot in time. It certainly relies on assumptions. That said, again, I'm by no means trying to downplay it. It's very complex. This is why people like Evie do this work and not people like me. It's a lot of math. It's a lot of methodology. It's a lot of, kind of prescribed how you kind of go about it, and interpretation of understanding that. So Evie, I appreciate your time. Michael, I know you did work on this as well. I appreciate your time. I'm sorry you drew the short straw and had to sit through this presentation with us tonight, but we certainly appreciate your time. Otherwise, and then the only other thing I did want to mention was, while it is valued to 6/30/21, those decisions were made prior to my time, but that is also consistent with how pension is valued. And the CalPERS pension reports are always a year delayed. So I think it's just to achieve consistency between the two different types of liability in terms of timing and valuation.
Sure. And it's nothing when I brought it up, I didn't mean that that was not the right thing to do. I think a lot of agencies actually do the same way you guys did. It's very specific to California though. I work in other states and they don't do the look back method. But I think with the look back method, one of the advantages is obviously you are not rushed when you do your audit. Like you can complete the results earlier than when you typically do your audit after the fiscal year end, because your liability is actually measured a year earlier. So that is one of the advantages, and it's really by no means, you know, unique. I would say it is actually more common than not in California.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, just one last plug. If you ever need any kind of I don't have all the services that we provide for you guys. I don't have it in front of me. But if you ever need discussions on okay, how should I approach this OPEB liability, as you also look at your pension, like you said, you're trying to figure out how to distribute the available money between different benefits. We can certainly help you with that. And you know, you have our contact number. We have public finance consultants who have worked with a lot of municipalities. He used to be finance director in public entity as well. So we can certainly help you brainstorm on how best to approach, you know, the different liability.
No, I appreciate that. And I should also state GovInvest actually does our financial disclosure GASB 68 reporting for our pensions as well, which is how we then brought them in to do this. And I've worked with them now for quite a few years, and they do offer a lot of services and learning opportunities. So and I've taken advantage of a few, and they're helpful. So thank you.
Okay, well, thank you again for the opportunity. Hope you have great rest of your day.
Thank you
Thank you.
both. Appreciate your time. Okay, so I guess do we then open this for comments?
Yeah, public comment on it. 1 second. Stephen.
Gosh, I wish she's still here on the line, because I did have some questions. You know, the CPI on a year-over-year basis is the worst inflation in 40 years. It's up to 8.3%. And how does that affect that liability? I really would like to know the answer, because what she's saying in that report is essentially, hey guys, if you're not going to be able to move up your contributions, there's a very unpleasant surprise in the future for you. Well, is she on the line? I wonder if she could answer how. She didn't really discuss inflation at all, and that's the biggest thing that is being discussed in the financial markets these days. Also, they're expecting a crash of the stock market. I don't want to go too doom and gloom, but I'm old enough to remember the 70s, where a lot of things were upside down, and we can't live on the assumptions of the 90s, 2000, and even, you know, up to 2020. So the other thing I want to say about this, because I guess she's not on the line, is I do think that we really need to look in terms of, you know, career employees versus a different status employees. We're carrying liabilities for both, and I really question whether or not, you know, we need a career employee to do certain tasks around the office. I do think that we need employees. I also think we need to expand our employee workforce, but we should, before we put someone in a permanent position, we really should ask the contribution this particular task will have on a 40-year basis or 30-year basis, whatever the career length is. Because, quite frankly, we have a lot of people that are basically most heavily employed during seasonal, seasonal efforts. So, and that could mean millions of dollars difference in liability. And when we get to the unpleasant point in the future where we don't have enough money. That's it.
Thanks, Stephen. Director Kilkenny, you have your hand up.
You're
You're
muted,
muted.
Kathleen.
Didn't mean to.
Okay, and then Lisa, if I can just address some of the comment there in terms of healthcare and liability for it. Who is offered healthcare is not decisions made by the district; it's decisions made through the Public Employee Medical Health Care Act. We have 17 active employees eligible for this as of this study. We have 17 current. Actually, that number's lower now, but as of this study, we had 17 retirees. Our part-time or our seasonal employees don't qualify for this. It's people who work over 1,000 hours in a year qualify for it. And for us, that is just our full-time employees. So you're talking about 3 park employees, 4 rec employees, 2 admin, 9 firefighters. That is the total allocation towards this. So, seasonal and people who are bringing in for that are not part of this equation in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you for that clarification, Eric.
Yes.
All right, well then let's, can we move on to the consent calendar? Are there any questions on the consent calendar? None? Anything from the public?
Yeah, 1 second. Stephen.
It's unfortunate that we have this format here where I make a comment and then my comments get mischaracterized. I would like to clarify any misunderstandings. What I was saying is that maybe we don't need as many full-time employees who are currently full-time employees. Maybe some of them could be part-time staff. And this is not to negate their contribution. It's just that maybe the contribution should be in other areas that we wish to grow the district. To me, it just doesn't make sense to have a full-time employee with retiree benefits, doing posters, for example, or layouts for the Marinwood Review. It's an important task, but we're paying a whole lot of money for that particular task to get accomplished. What if we had our employees, basically building trails, doing other things, growing the district, that they're going to be around for a lifetime career? I think that's what these positions are for. Everything else really should be on a seasonal basis. I never understood why, a rec department that basically contracts out most of the activities, with the exception of these, seasonal things like the Harvest Festival. Why we need full-time staff all winter when that type of work could be done on a seasonal basis. It really just doesn't make sense. And we're paying, millions of dollars worth of, it's millions of dollars worth of liability for each of these employees. And so I caution you to think long term. And of course, inflation is hurting us all. And so today's assumptions is going to be radically different in the future.
All right,
That's
thank
it.
you, Stephen. Thank you. All right, so then do we have a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
I move to adopt the consent calendar.
Second.
All right, can we have a vote, please?
Yes. Board President Ruggieri,
Aye.
Director Case,
Aye.
Director Kilkenny,
Aye.
Director Shea.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item E, public comment, open time for items not on the agenda.
1 second, please. Stephen.
Yes, first of all, I want to thank you guys for indulging me the last period because I really wasn't talking about the consent calendar. So I thank you for that. You know, our district is called the Marinwood Community Services District. And the idea of the Community Services District is to serve the community, which we do a good job of by and large. But it's not the Marinwood Adult Education District or the Summer Camp District. Those are things we provide, but they're really not our mission. Our mission is to serve the community. And so how do we make the community better? Well, it's by serving the community. And what do I mean by that is, you know, how well are we reaching out to various user groups? I contacted Luke earlier this week, or actually a couple of weeks ago, on having an opportunity to move my guitar and ukulele jams indoor during the winter. He's still yet to get back to me. But it's a nonprofit. It's a free for everybody. It's a community event. And in my view, you know, the community center is for the community. This is why the reason why we pay taxes. I know there's other groups like the Indian seniors that get together once a month and have picnic in the park. How are we reaching out to the community that is not bringing in revenue for the district? Is it important? I happen to think not only is it important, it's vital for a strong community. You know, we have a future before us. Hopefully it'll be a great and wonderful future. But to be a wonderful future, we really need to focus in on, you know, doing everything better today. So I guess I'm asking once again to reach out into the community, not just me, other people. There are plenty of other people. I'd like to see things like, oh, maybe a senior lunch or something like that. Or, of course, I've talked about the pickleball courts, which never seem to get figured out. But there are a lot of things we can do to meet the needs of the community that are not currently being done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate your comments. All right, so then we may move on to district matters. Item 1, resolution 2022-14, recognizing financial contributions received for the Marinwood Park Play Structure Replacement Initiative as designated for the sole expenditure purpose.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. So, you know, we've been working on this initiative kind of still in the initial planning, getting a few things done. We've received a large amount of grant funding. We've done outreach to the community. And we've also taken in a lot of valuable input from the community via a survey that went out that we're still working with as we move forward on this project. And a lot of members of the community have expressed an interest in contributing towards this campaign in a financial way. We do not have, you know, kind of a current policy that addresses designated donations and or contributions made from private individuals or foundations. Given the fact that we have this project here, I put together this resolution strictly to address the fact that we have had people express interest and we have received funding designated with the intent that it would be used towards this project. This resolution is just meant to formalize that process, just so that way the board, has something here that certainly recognizes that we've received this funding with the purpose of it being expended for this purpose, and then it kind of directs the staff to, track such donations and ensure that it is used for this purpose.
Thank you. Bill, question, comment?
Yes, is this going to open up to where people can contribute and we're going to have to earmark how many different places where they want their money to go?
No, this particular resolution only addresses the play structure replacement
Okay, so
project.
if it so is desirous of our community to contribute to other things, we're going to have to come up with a separate resolution for those.
If you get to that point, I would probably recommend that you look at a more broad policy.
Okay.
That said, to your point, it also says, hey, somebody wants to contribute money towards something that maybe the district doesn't feel is a project that should be taken on or done by the district. So you want to be careful in that aspect of creating some sort of policy that says, hey, if you give us money to do something, we will do it. That's I would advise against that. My general policy towards donations is yes, I accept them. But when it comes to kind of, designated and expectations with a donation, somebody who's ran a nonprofit organization for many years, sometimes you need to be careful in that aspect.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Bill. Kathleen?
This time it really is real. Will this affect in any way our decision on if we want to put a plaque? Meaning, is there different levels? Will anything be disclosed about who donates what amounts?
Well, we actually have a memorial and recognition policy already that we
Okay.
do have. It's on our website, and it talks about, things like plaques or markers or things along that line. And there's absolutely a process that goes with anything like that. So just because somebody
Okay.
gives money, you don't have a give us this much and we'll put up a plaque in your name kind of a thing. These are discussions that start at a park and rec level and then eventually make their way to a board level for final approval in terms of plaques or recognition.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Kathleen. Anything else from the board? Any other questions?
Nope.
Anything from the public?
Yeah, 1 second. Stephen.
Well, it's wonderful when people contribute like the cases and a number of other people are doing in town. I would recommend that we do formalize it and we have specific things that we're donating towards. And we have different levels of participation. One very common way to raise money is to have memorial stones or tiles that families purchase. They can donate $100 or $200, whatever the amount is. But if we had a foundation, something a little bit more like a foundation, where these special projects are considered, I just think you might get a little bit more participation. So anyhow, I'm very excited about this project. I'm looking forward to the spectacular play structure that you have in mind. And I think there are certainly some other things that we could be doing. We mentioned the horseshoe pits. I was thinking we could expand that, because despite the alcohol, the meeting spot is very, very popular. And I think it's a very positive thing for our community to have people have people have a place to recreate and socialize. So anyhow, those are a few thoughts.
I have.
Whoopsies, I should go off mute. Sorry. Kathleen.
I just have a question about history. Have we ever, I know we're a government agency, but have we ever fundraised or asked for extra contributions from the community for any of our projects that we have not asked for, not gotten received from, but asked for in fundraising? I just wanted to ask history-wise.
Not in my time here. I mean, I've only been here coming up on 8 years, but certainly not in my time here. I can't really speak to the 62-year history of the district. I know we've taken out bonds back in the 70s, 80s for the purchase of open space land, but I don't know that we've ever reached out and said, hey, help us fund this.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thanks, Kathleen. Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, very good. Then can we please take a vote?
Board President Ruggieri,
Aye.
Director Case,
Aye.
Director Kilkenny,
Aye.
Director Shea.
Aye.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to District Manager report. Eric.
Yeah, I'll be brief here with this. Just a quick little update on the maintenance facility. They did pour all of the cement foundations and the retaining walls last week. All of those look really good. They're still moving along. The builders have still been great to work with and have a lot of really good suggestions as they come through just from practicality. But the project is progressing as anticipated. With that, moving on here, I give you an update, just wanted to give an update on the open space, fire prevention, vegetation management work that's happening. I don't really think there's too much of a need for me to go through it. You can see what's in the report. We do have some work still coming up that we're just trying to finalize on the vendors, working with the veg specialists in Santa Fe. And that's going to be over at the base of Grasshopper Hill, as well as in the kind of an open clearing area just south of the middle school along Las Colinas. So that work will be coming up here probably within the next few weeks. All of that's through the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. And then just on this other item, a note, and I actually want to dive into this just a little bit deeper if I could. I did get the draft agreement from legal counsel. He and I are actually going over one last little thing, and I'll send it to the developer. And then once we have a agreed upon, hopefully by the next meeting, I'll bring this to the board to authorize the district manager to execute. That talks about their financial contribution towards this project. I did want to bring up on this project, and there's been some interesting questions raised, and I just want to touch on them briefly and just be very clear that, in my perspective, this project is still in the exploratory phase. This has not been a project that's actually been authorized or approved by the board quite yet. There's a lot still left to go. In this exploratory stage, there's really kind of 3 primary objectives that we've been doing. One was, just to understand the project scope of what was possible and advisable through there, and then to get an estimate for the construction cost. We have already done that. We completed that a while ago. The second objective was to come to an agreement with the developer of the senior center on their financial contribution. This is in progress, but is very far along, as has been reported. And then the third objective is to kind of gain the cost estimates on the remaining planning research that's going to need to be completed. That's going to be things like biological studies, potentially geotech, but I don't believe that'll be the case. And some other permitting fees that'll come through the county for grading permits and such. And then be able to bring all of that information to the board, as well as anticipated timing to kind of make a go, no-go decision at that point in time by the board, if they want to commit the remaining financial and other resources towards this project. So right now, we're still very much in an exploratory stage. We're actually going to discuss some of the things I just talked about a little bit deeper. My intention is at the next Park and Rec meeting. John Campo, who's on our Park and Rec Commission, is senior open space resource planner for the county. Building trails on public lands is something that he has a lot of experience in, and all of the steps that have to go through. There's certainly a public process that'll come through all of this. So we're very, very early in this. So I just want to make it clear that we're not, looking at breaking ground, in the next couple months. Yeah, hopefully, Bill, maybe a year, but you got to get through all of those other steps. And then obviously, as the biological study comes out, we'll present that to the board. There'll be other chances for public comment on that, and that includes a large range of environmental factors too. So there's still a long ways to go, a lot of feedback and shaping of this project that is yet to occur, but we're still moving along.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, any questions on any of it?
Nope, I appreciate it, Eric. That helps me out.
But my pleasure. Yeah, and I know that some of you might be getting questions about it. There's definitely, some people are starting to talk. It hasn't really been a super public project outside of some conversations here and at the Park and Rec Commission level. But still at this point, it's not a project. It's it's an initiative. It's something that we are exploring. And so as we get more information, and we can give you the information that you need to make educated decisions on whether this is a go or no go, and obviously public input's going to be a part of that too. So I appreciate it all.
Great. Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board? No.
I think, oops, sorry, I'm being slow on my unmute. I think just a quick one, because it pertains to, I think, what we talked about at PNR, Eric, is you mentioned in your report, you were talking about the invasive species at the base of Grasshopper Hill. Is that the same conversation that's kind of being extended from that PNR discussion?
Correct.
Okay, and so was the determination, it was made that we're going to go in and deal with that? I just know at the PNR was kind of like up in the air, and then you were going to talk to John later, because he's an expert, and he was going to, I think, probably talk to some of his people that he works with.
Yeah, we haven't made that full determination on whether we're going to on that particular species, which is what you're thinking of, which is the yellow star thistle, I think it was called.
Yes.
But there's also some broom out there and stuff that's all invasive that needs to come out too. So that's been part of all of our fire prevention efforts that we've done. Kind of like alongside Idleberry Road and back in there is just kind of removing some of the broom and stuff. So invasive species is just kind of a broad term, but we haven't made a determination on whether or not we're going to try to treat that yellow star thistle or not yet. I certainly have conflicting reports on it. So, kind of depends on who you talk to. Some says, if you treat it early, you can possibly get it. Others say this is something that if you're going to try to treat it, you treat it every year, and the county open space says we don't even deal with, we just, if it's there, it's there, and there's not much we can do about it. So, it's we're certainly talking to some of the vendors about it as well.
And do we, I guess maybe a follow-up question to that, being that it's fire mitigation type stuff, do we, just thinking about where the proposed trail is, have we ever done any fire mitigation there?
No, and that's in large part kind of due to access, not to mention the way it's kind of on a north facing slope, so it's naturally a much lower risk in that area. But assuming this trail gets built, it's actually going to clear out a lot of old dead brush and stuff that's in there. And I know that was one of the questions that had come up. I think simply by the construction of this trail, it'll get some of that done. Some of the area we have been looking to is actually a little bit farther south. God, is that Aaron? Elvia Court. However, our access to that got kind of blocked when they started actually developing that huge lot, because that was going to be our access way. So now that's been put on hold until that development is done, because that development will actually include a access way to get into that section of the open space.
Okay, great, Eric. Thank you very much. Appreciate the
welcome.
clarification.
Yeah, you're welcome. It just wasn't identified as high threat.
Yeah, okay.
Appreciate that. Anything else from the board? Anything from the public?
1 second. Stephen.
Yes, thank you. So actually, I'm surprised that the maintenance facility is on track, because well, in the last week, I've seen some work, but probably the month prior, I saw almost no visible signs of work being done there. And it's very frustrating, because this is a very small project, even though we're paying a lot for it. Some of you may have seen the post that I made on Nextdoor that raised a few eyebrows, got a lot of comments, and actually got me banned. And that was comparing the cost of what we're paying for that little fence project is the equivalent of what President Biden is paying for a fence around his Delaware home. Now, I don't have any problems with the Delaware project at all. You know, our presidents need to be protected, but I do have a huge problem with the amount of money that we are wasting on this project. I'm curious, I did go by there. It looks like there's going to be like a holding area. I don't know how the drainage is going to work from those pits, that lower level pits. Maybe someone can explain that to me. Maybe that's part, you know, I just don't know anything about that, but I think unless there's drainage into the creek, that's going to be a problem during the torrential rains that we have every winter. This project for Miller Creek Trail, I'm going to bring most of this up during the my rec comments, but I do think we would and the community would benefit from a program similar to the young lifeguards programs. Let's call them Marinwood Rangers, but basically these would be kids that would be building trails, doing outdoor work and fun outdoor activities, contributing to our community, but also working a lot of that energy off from these young kids. I saw a group in the park on Sunday, which I'll talk to you more about in the future. But I think we're missing out on a cheap source of labor, but it's not just the cost of the labor, but it's the contribution to the community. We can shape the character of our children, as well as maybe give them some money and get some work done that we need to do, and it'll last for generations and it'll be a source of pride. That's it, I guess.
All right. Thank you, Stephen. Is there anyone on the call who can speak to the question around the drainage, the maintenance facility that Stephen raised?
Yeah, I could speak to it. I'm assuming he's referring to what's known as a bioretention pit. Actually, all of the roof surface drains plus drainage now from the east courtyard goes into this bioretention pit. Draining directly into the creek actually is not allowed. This is, basically comes through county requirements through land use. It was built to designed by a civil engineer with plans that were approved by the county. The water drains into this pit, filters down through, and in the event of heavy rains, the pit is actually built in such a way that if it was to fill, then it would kind of drain over the side. But the way the pit is dug down, I believe it's about 18 inches deep, followed by another 6 inches of permeable crushed gravel. Beneath that is another 2 feet, I think, of sand. So this is a professionally designed, it holds through standards and plans approved as required by the County Department of Land Use within their Community Development Agency.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Eric.
You got it.
All right, so then moving on to fire department matters. Item 1, agreement between the County of Marin and Marinwood Community Services District for fire protection and emergency services to County Service Area 13.
Sure. Thank you, Lisa. My staff report, kind of covers both of these. These are agreements that we enter into every year. They're always entered into a little bit into the year just because of the nature of how the cost of these agreements are done. Involves reconciliations with the prior year because we're making estimations. CSA 13 pays a percentage of the overall fire budget based on their percentage of living square feet located in CSA 13 versus the entire population of CSA 13 in Marinwood. The costs, kind of do go up a little bit every year. The CPI increase is part of this as well. Fire budgets, don't go down really any years. They kind of, rise on a slow and steady rate. There is a larger jump this year. I actually had a conversation with it prior to sending it over with the assistant county administrator who works on this with me. Last year, when we put these together, we still hadn't finalized the MOU with the firefighter. So obviously there were some wage increases, expenses in there that were calculated in for 2 years, basically carried over to this year. So that explains kind of the larger jump. Normally the jump is closer to around 5% per year. This year it's a little bit larger. They understood, not to mention just the increased cost of operation. So there is an increase. Total fees for service on the CSA 13 contract are actually going to be about 45,000 higher than I estimated in the budget. So that's about 45,000 more in revenue. And then on the smaller agreement for juvenile hall site, it's just under 5,000 in additional revenue than what I estimated. So this will bring in a little bit more than I had originally budgeted for. But these have already been vetted through the county administrator's office. They are understanding and comfortable with the amounts. After they get approved today, and I get with Lisa and signed, I'll bring them over to the county and they'll go in front of the county board of supervisors for final approval.
Great. Thank you very much, Eric. Any comments or questions from the board on item 1? Go ahead, Bill.
Move to approve.
All right, well, first we got to get the questions and comments from the public.
Yeah, and Lisa, I do appreciate you making note. We do need to do a separate action for each of these, please. So,
Yep,
right.
I'm talking about item 1.
I know it. You're perfect. I appreciate it. 1 second, please. Stephen.
Yeah, this is actually a comment for both items, so you don't have to call me again. Do I understand correctly that these are indexed to actual cost? My concern is with 8.3% inflation, everything's going up, fuel's going up, wages going up, everything's going up. We just want to make sure that our partners in fire protection are full partners and on a percentage basis. So Eric, maybe you can address that. I think that's what you said, but I just didn't quite hear it the way I wanted to hear it.
Yeah, sure. Any other questions?
Any other
No,
questions?
that's it.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Stephen. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, Yeah, as I said, and maybe I wasn't clear on it. There, especially on the CSA 13 side, this is based on a percentage of overall budget for the fire operations expenditure budget. They pay, it's roughly 26% of the total budget. I think it's actually like 25.78% at the end of the year. So around this time next year, we will look at the actuals and then reconcile out what that estimate was. If we were over budget, that amount basically gets applied to the following year. If we come in under the expenditures, then that amount is deducted from the following year. So it is actually based on the true actual expenditure, but you don't know what that is until the year end.
Good. Thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
All right, do I have a motion to approve?
Bill?
Bill,
Motion
buddy.
to approve.
I'll second that.
All right, may we have a vote, please?
Board President Ruggieri,
Aye.
Director Case,
Aye.
Director Kilkenny,
Aye.
Director Shea.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, passes. Item 2. Questions, comments from the board? Questions, comments from the public? Nope. All right. Motion
Move to approve.
All right.
Second.
Nice. All right. Can we have a vote, please?
Board President Ruggieri,
Aye.
Director Case,
Aye.
Director Kilkenny,
Aye.
Director Shea.
Aye.
All right. Item 2 passes. Let's move on to item 3, Chief Officer Report and Activity Summary.
Yeah, obviously Chief White is not here, as I explained. He was at a training, a fire chiefs conference. And I mentioned that if you find yourself inconvenienced to make it to this meeting, by all means, you give us a detailed report. I think we can live a meeting without you. So I guess what I would just ask here is, you've obviously read his report, I'm sure. If there's any questions or any things that I can either translate to him upon his return or potentially answer for you, I'm happy to.
Thank you, Eric. Any questions, comments from the board? Go ahead, Kathleen.
I have one question. How come we don't do the National Night Out?
We did do it, actually. Our firefighters participated over at
No, I know that, but how come we don't do one at the community center?
that would be a good question for the fire department. It's a public safety thing. I think they get invited to go over to this other one, and that's where they go.
Gotcha. Okay.
Thanks, Kathleen. Anything from the public?
No, there's no comment on the chief report.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to Park and Recreation matters. Item 1. The draft minutes Park and Recreation Commission meeting. Oh, so this is you, Director Case.
Here I
Where's yours?
go. All right, let me jump into my notes here. A very exciting meeting it was. The commissioners did ask about the fire commission going bi-monthly. And so they asked that kind of they're going to turn that into an agenda item and discuss that more formally. Let's see, we already talked about the invasive species over on Grasshopper Hill. That was a big conversation about what to do with that or potentially what not to do with it. I don't want to steal any of Luke's thunder here. Luke presented a lot of great stuff and honored a lot of people on his staff. And I think the general consensus was just that everybody on that side, as we kind of looked at it being the end of the summer, that everybody was doing a really nice job in the Park and Rec department, and we appreciated that. And then items of interest that came about were, again, the meeting frequency for the Park and Rec Commission. There are some commissioners who wanted to start really looking at the timeline for the playground structure, and it was noted that when the maintenance facility is wrapped up, that was, oh, wait, I don't want to misspeak here. I feel like, yep, when the maintenance facility gets wrapped up, the staff will turn a strong focus to the playground restructuring. And so there was discussion about wanting to know what the timeline of that was going to look like. And then there were Stephen, as an item of interest, talked about public engagement and just wanting to increase the level of public engagement. Any questions there?
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Discussion of the meetings is because
They
what,
noted that in the fire commission's
In the board
notes, and
minutes.
probably looking at our minutes, that the fire commission, we had approved to go to every other month, and so they were wondering about that themselves. The big, just to make this really clear, the big thing that started being discussed, although it wasn't an agenda item, so it was just kind of a little bit of off the cuff discussion, was more around the commissioners being concerned that if they did go to bi-monthly meetings, that they make it very clear that they would meet as needed every month for something like the playground structure, for things that certainly pertain to them, that were issues that were time sensitive. So, but an official discussion was not had because it was not an agenda item. It was more along the lines of a suggested agenda item for the next one based on our minutes. Does that answer your question, Kathleen?
it does, and then we'll discuss it next week or next week
Exactly.
as an agenda item. Okay.
If they want to move forward with it. So it'll be the exact same process as the fire commission. It'll be a formal agenda item. They saw it. And to Chris's point, I mean, it was a relatively brief conversation. I was the one who brought up that, you know, with the fire commission doing this, it was duly noted that, you know, just because they go to every other month doesn't mean they can't continue to meet monthly as needed or have other special meetings. And then I told them the way we would do this is it would need to be, we would formally agendize it, then they could have a much deeper conversation about it, present the bylaw amendment, and then it would go as a recommendation for potential approval to the board. So if the P&R commission decides at the next meeting that they do want to do this and recommend it to the board, then it'll be on the board agenda for the meeting after that.
Okay, for discussion.
Well, for potential approval at the board level.
I thought we came twice for, like, I thought for the fire commission, we discussed it and then went back to,
No, we just brought it up in the same scope of how Chris just brought it up, that the commission discussed this, and then it went as a formal item to the commission, and then it went back to the board for final approval.
okay. I just feel like they cover more than fire. So it'd be,
Well, yeah, they cover Park and Rec.
no, they have a lot. Thanks, Eric. And we haven't had a fire since, or we've had one. I just feel like their agenda is a lot more full and things have to be, they have a lot more to address than fire commission, so.
And to be totally transparent, the feeling that I had from some of those commissioners was they were not as, you know, like
Dead
they had not made their decision. I think they noted it from the fire commission and it just piqued some interest. And so it was a real brief, like, okay, we should probably talk about that.
Yeah, all right. I just
Any
think,
other questions from anybody else?
go on. Mhm.
All right. Thank you. Any questions from the public?
Now, 1 second. Steven.
Yeah, first I want to thank Chris for his excellent reporting. It's, you know, I just love it. I also wish we could record these meetings because that can fill in the gaps of whatever may have been missed in the report. But I do agree with Kathleen very much that the Park and Recreation Commission does have a fuller agenda. It's more dynamic. There's seasonal things that come up. In the winter, we may be dealing with, down trees and stuff. And I hope that we wouldn't go every other month, because it gets to a point where, what are they actually doing? Are they providing any oversight or benefit to the community? Also, without detailed reports like we received tonight, although it was a verbal report, the videotaping is essential. Do you seriously, I hope you and everyone on this meeting agrees that we can have a beautiful Miller Creek Trail, and we can grow our community. We can have beautiful things in our park. Well, that requires oversight. That requires vision. It requires leadership, and of course, accountability and communication with our staff. So please don't do anything with the Fire Commission except make it more transparent and involve the community more. Anyhow, I guess I got on my soapbox. I apologize again, but anyhow, thank you very much for the report.
All right, thanks, Stephen. Moving on to the item 2, grant agreement between County of Marin and Marinwood CSD for disbursement of Measure A tax proceeds.
Yeah, I'll try to just make this clear and concise. All this is, so when the agreement originally, or not the agreement, I'm sorry, when Measure A originally passed in 2013 and all of the applicable agencies were identified, each agency basically enters into this Measure A grant agreement, which you see is attached. That expired in April of 2022. They put it back on the ballot in June. It passed again. It is considered a new ordinance, and as such, they have presented basically an agreement recognizing the new term durations of the agreement. Nothing else has changed. The reporting has stayed the same. The annual requirements, what the funding can be used for, has stayed the same. There really are no changes here. It's just the fact that technically this is a new ordinance and a new measure. Even though they billed it as a renewal measure, it's still new. It went back to the voters. One expired, a new one came on. So they've asked all agencies just to form a new agreement. My recommendation here is, simply authorize the district manager to execute the Measure A agreement between the county and the CSD.
All right, thank you, Eric. Anything from the board? Any questions, comments? Right, nothing, thank you. Then anything from the public?
1 second. Stephen.
Yes, I request that you add a few things on how you're going to spend the money. For example, toilets, flush toilets for Marinwood Park, accessibility for Marinwood Park. This was in the original Measure A that projects like this would be included, but somehow we got off track here. We did discuss, I think, last meeting about the toilets, the flush toilets that are available pretty cheaply. They come as a unit that you unload them off a trailer, and you put them on a pad and you're good to go, and connect the plumbing. There is no other community like ours with $1 million homes that uses basically third world toilet accommodations for its park guests. We really need to get that project done, and it should be either through Measure A or through our ordinary budget, but it should come quickly because our parks are more popular than ever, and let's keep keep going on the, keep improving our park. And that's the number one thing we can do to improve the guest experience in our parks. So specifically request accessibility. That means fountains that work, toilets that are accessible, and pathways that are at least in Marinwood Park that can be navigated on a wheelchair. They don't have to be paved, but they should fulfill standards, which is not a big deal because it's mostly accessible right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. All right. Do we have a motion to approve?
I motion to approve.
Second,
All right. And can we have a vote, please?
Board President Ruggieri,
Aye.
Director Case,
Aye.
Director Kilkenny,
Aye.
Director Shea.
aye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Motion passes. Big sigh from Bill. Moving on to recreation and park maintenance activity reports.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm not going to go through everything in my report, but I'll just hit a couple of the main points. I started my report off with a staff update. I mentioned this at the Park and Rec Commission meeting, but our recreation supervisor, John Paul Kessler, has left Marinwood to go move to Massachusetts for family reasons. Left on good terms, although we were really sad to see him go. John Paul has worked for the district on and off for many years. I think he started possibly in 2007, I believe is when he first started as a lifeguard, even before my time, and worked as a lifeguard and at one point was managing the pool, worked as a building attendant, as a park maintenance staff employee. He worked in the camps. He did almost every job you can do here in a part-time style. And then we were really happy to bring him on board as a full-time recreation supervisor a couple of years ago. And it was he did a great job with us. So we're sad to see him go, but we wish him well, and we're still in touch. But we've begun recruitment for a new recreation supervisor, and those will be some big shoes to fill. Not technically, not literally big shoes, but he never wore shoes. So, but there'll be big shoes to fill figuratively. So, John Paul, just touching on a couple points that were made earlier in the meeting, the role of the recreation supervisor, the biggest chunk of that role is overseeing the Marinwood pool, and that includes advertising, recruiting, and hiring all of the staff each season. Training them, certifying them in lifeguarding, training the non-lifeguards, the pool attendants, and some of the swim instructors in CPR and first aid, running preseason trainings, annual trainings every week throughout the summer, doing all the scheduling and running the swim lesson program, overseeing the lifeguard and training program. We do have a few random special events at the pool that go on. And it's a really big job. I did that job for almost 10 years before I got into this position, and that alone is just a huge responsibility during the pool season, which runs a little bit, if you're counting the recruitment, starting January, February through October. And then in addition to that, that position for us oversees all of our adult programming and some of the youth programming, as well as oversees a lot of our special events. We run anywhere from 12 to 16 community events in a given year. And that position plays a really instrumental role in marketing, setting up, and helping put those events on. And then in addition to that, with our parks maintenance crew being down to 3 from 6, 7, 8 and past chapters in the district's history. I do rely heavily on the recreation staff to help out with some of the building maintenance, some of the pool maintenance, and John Paul was really instrumental in helping us keep things functioning at the pool, helping me out with creek restoration efforts and playing a sort of a pseudo parks maintenance role in addition to his recreation staff role. So just putting that out there, that's a job that we're recruiting for. It's a really hard position to recruit for because it's a jack of all trades. It's a year-round role, and it's someone that needs to know a lot of things about a lot of different subjects. And I can't imagine operating this department with that or any of these other 3 positions being part-time, so or seasonal. It really is something that we're hands-on all year round. There was mention earlier about someone that makes posters full-time for us, and I'm not sure who that is, but that would be great to have a full-time poster maker, but we absolutely do not have that on staff. Everyone here works really hard and does about 5 people's jobs. If you looked at any other recreation department in Marin County, we are the leanest department that does absolutely the biggest programming. So and I say that very proudly, and our staff is great, and that's not a complaint at all. It's just to try to clarify a couple of things that maybe came up earlier. So we're really excited to see John Paul go. He was homegrown and really got it, and we'll be working really hard to find someone to fill that role. And in the meantime, everyone's picking up the slack. And as well, it's fun to get back to my roots down there managing the pool right now. I'm looking forward to having someone ready to take that over. Other news to report on, we have our fall programming is starting up. Our preschool program started right after Labor Day. Our after school program started a few weeks before that, and those programs are both running really well. We have a new teacher in our preschool, Jolene, who's doing really well, and a couple of new staff in our after school program. And we're really excited to have those kids back. We have a lot of returning kids this year, and it's been great to have them in the community center. The pool is still going strong. We're open until October 7th, and I'm really grateful to all the high school guards that are willing to come in and work before school in the early morning, which is something I never would have done when I was in high school. But we've got some really dedicated staff that are able to come in and get here at 6 a.m. and get the pool opened, and then they take off and go to high school, and that's pretty incredible. So I'm really grateful to them. And we've trained up a couple of new people to be able to fill the gaps during the school day when our other guards are at school. And as much as I'd like to, I am not advocating for them to skip school to come work at the pool. As much as that would be helpful to us, I'm full pro education for our lifeguard staff. So things are going strongly. I think we'll be okay getting through the end of the season, which ends on October 7th. And the pool season's been going really well. Our next special events include the Halloween Harvest Festival, which takes place on Friday, October 14th. And then the next week, we'll have our fall art show. So we're getting things planned and prepared for that, and we'll announce more details as we get a little closer to those. But we've got a lot of other classes that are going on and starting up in the coming weeks, and we're really excited about that. On the parks maintenance side of my report, the staff have done a lot of really good work restoring the turf after the summer foot traffic. Our newest parks employee, Caesar, he comes from a golf course background, and he's given us a lot of really good input on how we can improve our turf maintenance. And we've been trying to implement some of those new things, adding some different fertilizers, using some different equipment to aerate, and the grass is looking really, really good. We've got some work still to do on certain spots, but I've never seen it look so green and vibrant and fluffy. And I'm really excited that some of his advice is really bearing fruit. So we'll keep working on that in a couple of trouble spots, but overall it's going really well. We've got a couple other repairs done around the district, some drinking or a water line to get some drinking fountains working, and some fence repairs. And we've got some good projects coming up later this fall. We'll be doing some repairs of the parking lot, some repairs at the pool once the pool season's over, and some new plantings, both at the turn where you turn onto Miller Creek from Lucas Valley, that area that's mostly a big sea of wood chips right now. We're going to put some strategic plantings in that area, and Summit Creekside Park and a few down closer to the park shop. So we're really excited about that, and those are some good things to come. So I'll keep reporting as we make it through our to-do list this fall. But I'll end there and I'll open it up to any questions anyone has. Thank you.
Thanks, Luke.
I'll go first. I wanted to just say that I'm really, really sad to see JP gone. He was a pleasure to work with and always had a great attitude. Even when he had to fill in, like you, in lifeguarding for the swim team. So he will be a big, big missed personality. And then the other question that I have for you is the walkways. I know you and I touched base at one of the Music in the Parks, and you kind of cleaned up the one on like the median on Miller Creek, but has anything else kind of, or did you assess it and see that everything else is okay? Like, it's yours expertise over mine, so.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So we actually did go through and assess the walking paths in that mostly in that side of the neighborhood. That is one of the areas that one of our contractors does some regular maintenance on. But we went through. There was some minor pruning that we had to do to some low hanging branches and some foliage that was like sticking out into the paths. But overall, the paths were deemed pretty clear and safe for traffic, to and from school. So we did a few minor trimmings. I don't know that you would have noticed anything drastic, but we did hit those paths ahead of the school year starting up.
Perfect. And again, like, I trust this is your realm, so thank you.
Absolutely.
Luke, the one thing that I forgot in my PNR thing was, I think Commissioner Sasham brought up the whole dog waste thing on the main park area. Obviously, it's not an issue right now because it's closed off for the turf repair. But I didn't know if you guys have gotten a chance to think about that as a staff, or if that's just something we'll hear about in the future.
Yeah, Chris, that's interesting that you bring that up. We actually have had some talks with staff this last couple of weeks about that, the main park, and specifically in regards to the dog walkers in the area. So as far as a dog waste station in the main park, I do at this point feel like that would be a little bit of an enabling message in terms of we've had a lot of dog walkers coming in. I'm sure you see them across the street from your house, but dog walkers coming and using the park as a pseudo dog park in the mornings, dogs off leash, tearing up the turf. We've seen a definite increase in dog waste that hasn't been picked up in the park. So right now, the fencing is up as a deterrence to keep the dogs and people off while we restore some of the turf and get some things spruced up there. But in general, we're going to increase some of the signage and just remind people that the Marinwood Park is a on leash area for dogs, and that people should not be letting their dogs like run wild through the park in the mornings or any other time. And we really are not looking to do any encouraging of increasing the dog traffic in the park at this time. There are plenty of dog stations around, but as far as and there will be an additional one added, I believe, where there was one as you go into the Panhandle, there was a station on the park shop itself, and we'll make sure that there's one there. It's kind of where the construction is right now, but we'll make sure that one's there as well. But as far as in the main park, we're not looking to have that be a dog a holding zone or a dog park, and we are trying to deter that right now at this point. And that could be maybe be a bigger conversation for later, but we have talked on the staff level about that.
Perfect. Thank you, Luke. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Thanks.
Great. Anything from the public?
1 second. Steven.
I always seem to rankle someone when at these meetings, and I apologize, Luke, if I offended you in some of my earlier remarks. I think you mischaracterized what I said, maybe unintentionally, but What I was saying is there's a difference between a career employee and a seasonal employee. And if we look to redeploying our assets, our talents, maybe we can have more rewarding careers for our employees, as well as getting more work done for the district. I do think that the great contributions of the rec department should never go unnoticed, but it doesn't mean that we should overlook ways to improve it. My frustration mostly, and you're improving in this area, which I commend, but it's the open space that concerns me. It's some of the maintenance issues, because so much is focused around one section of our park, and we have a whole lot more land and assets available for the community to recreate in. Some areas are taken care of really well, and other areas, quite frankly, are embarrassing. And one of those things that frustrated me was the fountain, which I mentioned earlier, and you repaired. And I want to also specifically thank you for that drinking fountain that you put in there. I think that one of the key things that we are missing in this district is the expertise, the building expertise, the landscaping expertise, the open space expertise that we need to improve other parts outside of our rec department area. And I would like, if you're hiring people, I am much more interested in getting those responsibilities filled, as opposed to someone who does, a pool director, which is important, but I'm just wondering whether some of the current staff can't pick up a little bit more of that slack. Maybe, I guess what I'm saying is, I think your organizational chart needs a little bit of work to get more out of your staff and more for the public. As usual, you do a good work, you have a great attitude, and you make fun of events, and I really do appreciate it. With regards to the dogs in the park, they're not all now in front of the tennis courts off leash. And I love dogs, but I do recognize that there's a problem there. And I do think signage is needed. I do want to make one last point, and that is, you hired a new staff member, Will Kunzel, I think his name. Nice guy. He looks like he could be your younger brother, Luke. And we see him on Sundays, which is fantastic. I think if we had more staff working outside our normal business hours for our staff, I think we could have a cleaner, better park and not have some of the problems that we do have now with dogs off leash, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. All right, so moving on to board member items of interest and requests for future agenda items.
I've got, I would love to go back to, and I think Luke's staff is doing this, but just to make sure we get it on our agenda, talking about toilets, because what's better than talking about toilets? So if I could add that, and a long time ago,
Like
we
toilets where?
Wait, wait, what?
Like,
And why would we be talking about toilets at a board meeting?
in the park.
like as a potential project?
Yeah.
Bring it
talked
up
about
to
it
the
like
commission first.
Didn't that go to the commission?
Well, we talked about it. Well, whether my request then gets pushed down to the commission, that's fine with me. We had talked about this. It was on Luke's activity list a couple times, I think it was maybe even last month, because we had the porta potty was pushed over. And he was doing some research on that, and I just wanted to make sure we didn't, like, I'm sure he's not, but I wanted to make sure we as a group didn't lose that thread of him doing some research on toilets.
So can we put it at, do you want it as an item so we can discuss and send you back to PNR?
So that I just don't want to lose the thread. So
Okay,
it's not currently something on PNR. So I guess I was under the impression that we could push agenda items to PNR.
Chris, I'll just to add in there, thank you for bringing that up. That is something that once staff has some better handle on the feasibility and some options, we will definitely bring that to the PNR commission as a first step. Just that's where my
perfect.
head's at with that topic, and so that's definitely on our to-do list. And we'll bring that up in future meetings, and it'll, I think, would eventually make its way up to the board if that helps at all.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
but no toilet talk yet.
Oh, I've got a great picture for you guys. I had a
That's
toilet
awesome.
delivered in literally 1,000 pieces in a box.
Toilets and dog feces. You're on a roll here, Chris.
I'm the man. And you know what?
Man.
Since it all fits together, I would love to pick up the thread from a bunch of months ago where I started talking about the tables that were in the fireman's picnic area. And that conversation went in a different direction than I had intended. I did not mean to remove the tables from there. I would love to see if we could come up with some tables to put strategically in our open space at some hiking overlooks, so that all the hikers don't just have to sit on the ground when they're enjoying our beautiful open space. Again, probably more PNR, but hoping we can push that to PNR.
I think that would be a good conversation to also have with John Campo in there too, who
For
because
sure.
there are a lot of regulations too with open space, and you'd be surprised, but even something like putting a bench out there isn't as welcomed of a thing as you would think. And we do have easements on the open space to
Right.
keep it kind of in that natural. There is a bench out on Blackstone Canyon that
Right.
has been called out several times when they
Totally.
go looking through the easements on that. Unfortunately, it weighs about 8,000 pounds, and how it got out there many years ago, I understand, is quite a story too. But
Yes.
I think that, you know, things like bench placements and stuff along trails is, I'll be curious to get some feedback on that.
Cool. Yeah, and I'm thinking more like picnic tables as we get up to the peaks on like Queenstone, up there. And again, maybe the discussion is about the easements that I clearly don't understand, because we frequently go to, you know, a place that has basically exposed rebar and cinder block.
Sculptures,
Just what's that?
Art.
sculptures.
It's the art gallery. You are correct.
The old antenna site is what you're talking about up there.
Yes. So, you know, I'm just curious about that. That seems a lot more dangerous than having a picnic table out there.
Yeah.
Might think.
Well, we could, we'll get some feedback on it for you.
Yep,
We'll talk
Totally.
about
That's all I'm looking for, is to continue the conversation.
And I have one thing that just popped into my head, and as much as
That scares me.
you're being recorded, be careful. As much as I trust and support you not renting out the community center, and I know that, is that something that we can discuss and review for revenue? Or, because I know renting it out brings in more maintenance than it does revenue sometimes. And I saw that on the list, we need a new AC, like there's a lot going on. So can we discuss that, or am I out of line as the board level, which it's a staff level?
Yeah, I don't know that I can comment on the latter part of that. I don't, if you want to discuss it, that's fine. We'll certainly give you the staff opinion on it,
Perfect.
and the staff recommendation, which is, kind of the status quo of where we've fallen on for what is ultimately an aging facility. The groups that do use it are actually registered nonprofit groups. One's a church, one is the Lions Club, which has been using it. And that's kind of, the only users outside of events that we put on, which does include the art show. I mean, that's our event as well. So it's, it is, yeah, we can have that conversation. I think where staff stands on it.
Mhm. Okay. That'd be great.
Thank you. Any requests from the public?
Sure, 1 second. Stephen.
Yes, you are the board. You don't have to put stuff down to the PNR commission to discuss. I don't even know why you're entertaining that. I mean, sure, they can be helpful, but if you decide you want toilets, I think you can discuss them. You're leaders of our community. Kathleen, I'm just guessing from her commentary that she's not too keen on that. And I just want to point out the alternative is toilet paper and stuff in the woods. And I have seen it, and I've seen dogs get into it. It's ugly and it's gross. And we're a community, a prosperous community. We need to step up and make all of our facilities up to current standards. There's not a single place that I can find in Marin County that uses these types of toilets that we have out by the tennis courts. So it's doable. You just need a will to do it. We're paying a lot for this, and then every time we want to do a project, we talk about hiring it out or having someone else do it. And, when it comes to stuff like benches, for example, where basically it's a slab of wood and, an element that you put for a base. I mean, it's totally a landscaping crew can do that very easily if there is the will. And this is what kind of bothers me, is that we keep looking to the outside like, oh gosh, we need to spend all this money, as opposed to let's get things done. I think it's great that that Chris is talking about putting some places for rest up in the open space. I think that's fantastic. And even Bill mentioned it, and I hate to say it. He said, "Oh, it's a sculpture up there." I think it'd be great to have a sculpture up there. If we could get one cheap and it looks pretty good. But, these are the kinds of things people do in their gardens. Let's do it in our open space. Let's love this community and make it a more beautiful place. I want to finish off with it's the Athenian pledge. And one of the things, Athenia, the ancient Greek city, you pledge to the city. And one of the things every citizen had to pledge to is making the community better for the future. And I would like that to be our motto in Marinwood as well. Can we do it?
All right. Thank you, Stephen. I like the motto. Go
May
ahead.
I make one comment? I am very indifferent about the toilets right now, because I don't feel like I have enough information to warrant a decision one way or another. And I believe that is why we have the Park and Rec Commission to do the research and make the recommendation, so then the board can make a decision on that. So it's not that I'm against it, it's that, or I don't want to do it, it's that I don't have the information in front of me to make a valid decision. Thank you.
Right, thanks for the clarification, Kathleen, and some item relating to the toilets will come up at some point with more research done on the topic ahead of time. All right. Anything else before we adjourn, or can we call it?
Motion to adjourn?
Second. Can I second that?
9:42, I'm out.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Night.
Bye.